Hey everybody. So the first thing we're going to talk about this month is pressing versus ironing, because that when we're working with these small pieces, that comes into play in a big way, because if you iron your little pieces, they can get distorted all out of place, versus when we press them, we keep them as close to their original shape and size as possible. So I'm going to have Michelle move the camera down so I can show you the difference. Okay, so I'm using a little best press here, and this is a piece of fabric as it comes out of the kit. Okay, and I'm going to iron this. I've dampened it, and now I'm going to run this back and forth, and you can actually even see it shrink up. This is how we pre-shrink. And I'm just this is ironing, and I'm ironing it dry so that I can then take it and cut it. So once I get done with that process, usually you want to leave it for just a tad, and then you can pick it up and you can see it's got some nice stiffness, but you can also see how distorted it became. It was cut nice and pretty, and now look at it. And that's what happens to your pieces if you don't pre-shrink them and you iron them versus pressing them. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you, this is a strip set that you're going to be using in month 3, and I've sewn and pressed one side, but I want to show you the difference between ironing and pressing. So first of all, whatever direction you want your seam to go, you want that fabric on top. So I want my seam to go towards the blue, so I'm going to put that on top. I'm then going to take my iron, and I'm just going to put it down, and notice I'm picking it up and putting it down, and this is called setting the seam. Just putting the iron on the seam so it knows basically where it is. Then I'm going to lift this up like this. Okay, now your instinct is to start doing this, but what you want to do is just take the iron and push it against the seam. Okay, and sometimes I do it on the wrong side first, but you just want to, because you want to get the extra fabric out of the seam, but you don't want to iron off the raw edges, because then you'll have all kinds of distortion. And if you want, you can flip it over and you can reset that seam on the back side. But what you've got now is a pretty pristine strip set where we haven't run the iron off like crazy off the edge to distort the edge. Okay, so that's a strip set. Again, now when you're stitching a triangle or you're pressing a triangle, this one especially you want to be careful, because this is on the bias, which means it's super stretchy. So when we want to press this, I always open it up and I kind of finger press it first, and then I'm just going to take my iron again, put it on the seam and hold it. I'm not going to move it back and forth. Once that seam is set, I pick it up, and there should be no extra fabric in the seam because I pushed it from the edge, but I didn't run my iron off the outside edge, and I didn't distort this seam. So, important thing to remember in quilting. This is ironing. Pressing is putting your iron down and lifting it up, down, lifting it up. And if you're pressing against a seam or you're working on a seam, you're going to set your seam, you're going to open it up, maybe, and you're going to just take the edge of the iron and just push it over on the seam. And as soon as you have it pushed out, you're going to pick it up and put it down. You're not going to iron. And that's the difference between pressing and ironing. Okay, so we just went through pressing versus ironing. Now we're going to take our strip set that we made, like this. This is for step number 1 in our construction, and we have to cut this into 4 3.5-inch pieces. So to do that, again, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to take a straight line and put it on the middle seam, because that's the stable seam. The outside edges will get sewn in if they're a little off, but we want it lined up with this so that we're nice and perpendicular. I'm going to clean cut this edge, and then I'm going to flip it around because I am right-handed and measure in 3.5 inches from the edge I just cut, and I've got the straight line on the seam and 3.5, so I know I'm nice and square. And there's 1, and I'm going to get a second one, 2. And I always get nervous at this point. Is my strip long enough? I get 3. If you can't keep that line on your seam while you're cutting, you can always clean cut that edge. And this is 3.5, and I've got a nice straight seam, so 4. So these are called, for those of you beginners, rail blocks or rail fence blocks. And so we need 3 of these, and if you look at your pattern, you're going to see that these go in the middle. If you can see this, they're going to go in the middle right here.
So you need 4, not 3.
4, sorry.
Okay.
So you have 4 of those cut at 3.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to set those over here. So that's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to make the little 4 patch in the center. And we've done this already a couple times, and somebody asked me, is there always going to be a 4 patch in the center? So I went and looked at the pattern, and the answer is yes, there's always a 4 patch in the center. So you have 3 4-inch pieces, and I'm going to use this to hold up. And so you're going to sew a blue, or whatever, this is color, I believe this is color 2, or print 2. You're going to sew it like this, 1/4 inch on each side. And then just like we just cut the rail fence block, once this is sewn, you're going to cut this into 2 1.5 inch segments. So it's going to come out looking like that. And actually, if I did it the same way, it would look like that. Okay? So you're going to get this out of these 3 4-inch pieces. So that is step 2. Then what you're going to do is you also cut 3 1.5 inch squares. So if I put this here, I'm going to, and it's going to look funny because I haven't sewn them in, but that's going to go in the middle. Those are the only little pieces you have to deal with. And then you're going to sew this one on the outside, and that creates your 4 patch center. Now remember, on the directions there are arrows showing you which direction to press your seams, so that when we go to put the whole block together, we have all our seams going in opposite directions. Okay? Now, the last thing you have to do for this month before you assemble is make half square triangles. Now, we've done a whole separate video on how to make half square triangles. But for those of you that, just so that you kind of know you're looking at the right thing, you're going to take your 4-inch squares, you're going to draw a line on one diagonal, you sew 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line, and you cut it apart, and then you're going to open these up, and you're going to press these, and you want to press them towards the darker color. And that is what we call a half square triangle. Okay? Now, you also have to trim them, and the video spends a lot of time talking about trimming. I'm not going to take the time here to trim them because we're just going to show you how to assemble the block. So again, I'm just pressing these so that they'll stay open for me, just right against that seam. And I've got the other 2 already pressed. All right, so now you will have 4 of these. You have 2 4-inch squares, and you will have 4 of these, and they should measure 3.5 inches after you trim them. Okay, so you've got your half square triangles, you have your rail fence blocks, right? And you have your 4 patch that goes in the center. Now all you have to do is follow the directions to put the block together. So, and I have struggled doing this upside down, but the top row is going to look like this, and the color goes in on the inside like that. Your middle row, these are going to be horizontal like this. We're going to have our 4 patch in the middle, and then we on the bottom row, let me see if I can do this. I just dropped one. I put this cover on because you couldn't see the white on the white. So I believe that one right, Michelle?
Yes, it is.
All right, and this like this?
Yep.
Okay.
Right
And
there.
here is this. And so you're
Up and
gonna
down,
up and down.
vertically. There you go.
There you go. And then you just have your little 4 patch in the middle, and that is your block. This block is actually pretty easy compared to the last 2 we've done. There's not many little pieces. It's all done in strip sewing, and I figured this would give you a little break. We'll be back to small pieces soon. Oops. And so that's your block for this month. This is month 3. Okay, thanks.